Welcome to another Dojo game review, and I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about process. I believe that going over your games is the path to improvement, and I began a show years ago on chess.com with the idea that if people annotated their games, I would go over it. And Tim, who we're covering his game today, was part of that show. And this has been going on for years. Tim has been submitting his games regularly for years. And I think you'll see in the writing of his notes that he's gotten pretty good at it. And I want to stress good, clear writing is clear thinking, and it definitely applies to chess and annotations. And the writing can also be writing of variations, the clarity of your variations when you do give them. Okay, so I just wanted to begin with that because I do feel this is great for Tim, and most players fail in this path in that it's too hard, it's too self-critical, and they end up playing blitz on the internet. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm not going to spend too much time on the opening because we have some important bishop d3, highfalutin, obviously, but we have some important positions to cover. Black has many choices, e5. And one of the more interesting move transpositions, really, that we've got, because what we have here is really very close to a Chigorin variation. Let's even play a couple moves. A Chigorin variation of the Ruy-Lopez we've transposed to, essentially, with the difference that this knight on g3 would be on b1, and this knight on d7 in the Chigorin would be on a5. That's the only difference, which I found interesting. And in a sense, they kind of balance themselves out because the knight on b1 needs improvement, and the knight on a5 also needs improvement. Okay, so rook f8, and this is Tim's first big moment. He chooses d5, which might objectively be the best move, but it's the most strategically complicated and hard to play move, and I'm going to try to explain. So imagine with the knights on a5 and b1, and Fischer playing that position a gazillion times, and you go over the guy's games, it's like one of the most common positions he had. The guy never pushed d5, never. And it's kind of interesting to think about. One is, I don't think he liked to play with space, and that's what you're committing to when you play d5. And the other, and this is something that neither player, I don't think, understood in this game, is that once you play d5, you are playing a King's Indian structure, right? And the good news for white is the bishop on b7 is truly misplaced. But on the other hand, black has a very simple plan, and it's not so clear at what white should be doing. What should black play? I think g6. He should aim for bishop f8. At some point, bishop c8 to bring the good King's Indian bishop back to the correct diagonal. And one of the things that's also interesting to think about from Fischer's perspective is Fischer often played a King's Indian with c5. So there would be a pawn on c4, but he'd throw that pawn out on c5 to kind of shoulder the white initiative on the queen side. And that points to the next problem that white has, is that pawns are pointing towards the queen side, but it's not so clear, well, like how? How am I supposed to get an initiative over there on the queen side? Not easy. So I have a lot of sympathy for Fischer not playing this position because it's hard. So I think black should play g6. Just makes sense to dominate the knight, get ready for bishop f8, g7. But c4, let's say it's possible to play chess this way. And then the question becomes, well, what do I do as white? And knight f5 is certainly reasonable, but here's one of the weird things that's about to happen. When black plays g6, it seems like we've accomplished something with knight h6, bishop h6, bishop h6, until you say to yourself, oh, it's the King's Indian, and he's getting rid of his bad King's Indian bishop. That's where it becomes a little tricky. So even here, maybe not. And then it becomes really hard. Like, well, what am I supposed to do? And I think what white needs to do here, and I do think white is better here, but I think it's hard to play. It would be hard for me as well. And that is, what you should be focused on is preventing black's play on the king side. And that's very hard to do mentally. And so black is going to play eventually for a regroup on the king side. Should play. We're going to see he's not going to in this game. Should play for a regroup on the king side. And then to hurt us white on the king side. And so my sense is maybe knight f5 is fine, but h3, knight h2, queen f3, knight g4. And the idea is it might turn into an attack, okay, over there. It might look like I'm building an attack. But first and foremost, I'm stopping black from doing anything over there. I want to make sure he can't do it. And that's one of the deep Nimzovitchian ideas, is that hindering your opponent from doing what he wants to do will turn into an aggressive action. That's some deep sauce, but we're gonna say that is what he wants to do. And white also does not want to trade pieces, and that's why knight f5 gets on me a little bit, because it will lead to a trade of pieces. Okay, still, if I was black, I'd play g6 here just to stop it. Okay. Next moment, I don't like a4. Similar reasons. I don't know what it does, and also now this knight coming to c5, not so special. Now when it comes to c5, well, it's talking to your pawn, and I know you found it very uncomfortable, because then you played your worst move of the game. You played a5. Losing time, and now you have zero chance of opening on the queen side. And, you know, if we imagine this position here, at some point you might play b4, a4. Conditions have to be right to do it, but that would be a way for you to eventually play on the queen side. You want to play on both sides. First thing, though, prevent black from getting his engine started. You gotta stop him from putting the key going into the ignition. You gotta slap it down. Get that key out of the ignition. All right, so a4, knight c5, a5. Now, in a lot of ways, this whole video is going to be about this a5 pawn. Because what we're going to see, okay, is that black doesn't understand that he has a King's Indian position either. And because he doesn't see that, what he ends up focusing on is saying to himself, oh, I could go hunt the a5 pawn, which is not only going to take him 1,000 moves, but once he does take on a5, at least our rook will be doing something, right? And before we make fun of him, I think it's healthy and good, actually, to make fun of this guy, even if it sounds cruel. Before we make fun of him, it's important to see this is a typical pawns aren't people situation, because when you don't know what's going on in the position, what your mind will do is it will focus on the easily accessible. What's the easily accessible? Well, maybe I can go win the pawn on a5. And that's how this guy loses this game. Okay, so what do I, bishop g5 looks like a good move here. You're about to play knight 3h4. I don't like it, but I like it better than, I like everything better than a5. Okay, bishop c8. It's a little hokey. Now, g6 is probably fine from black. If he wanted to get really highfalutin, he could play king h8, knight g8, and then g6 and completely shove you back, after which he's doing great. But his position's okay here too. I was going to say excavates your bishop. Fine. Okay. 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 And I flew through those moves fairly quickly. And I want to say black was reacting to what you were doing. And honestly, this is an interesting position for everybody to think about, like, well, what's going on and what should black do? Because here's where black lost it. And I think black, you know, I don't know, 1800, 1900 or something like that. And he doesn't understand. It's important to say out loud. That's why annotating the games is so important. To say out loud, it's helpful to say, oh, King's Indian position. And not only that, look, it's a King's Indian position without the bad bishop. How much better do you want it to get, buddy? How much better? It's King's Indian position where there's no play for white on the queen side. Nothing, zilch, it's gone. So even though there might be some definite nuance in the position for, you know, white and questions about what he should do, it's strategically amazing. Okay. Now, one of the things about the King's Indian and king's Indian structures is there's a variety of ways to give white a bloody nose. And so I don't know, we're not going to focus on black's move here, but bishop d7, let's say we start with that. Then we could play for things like knight h7, g5, knight h5, f4, playing for f5. And then there is, let's call it, because you're in Scandinavia, let's call it Thor's plan. You got Thor's plan of playing, I'm just going to make a couple of random moves for white here, and I'm just going to make a random move. And then here, and then g5, g4. I call that Thor's plan. And the point is, I really want to stress, black's power is on the king's side because his pawns are pointing in that direction, right? That's where they're going. So that's where his power is, and black didn't understand it. So what happened? He didn't know, so he's going to hunt the pawn. Typical, textbook, pawns aren't people moment. And let's see how he gets punished. Queen d8, bishop e3, knight fd7. And at first I'm a good chess psychologist. When someone makes a move that I don't understand, I can usually like piece together what it is. But in this one, I was like, wow, what is he really doing? He's not doing f5, right? Knight h2. And I was like, oh no, he played knight d7 so that we couldn't play bishop b6 so he could go take the pawn. Oh no, oh no. All right, so now we build it up. We punch him, let's go. And it's a hard life here. G5, queen h5, and you can't do queen e8 because your knight's hanging, buddy. Oh no. So snip, it's lost. Queen h5, queen e8, and rook f3. What Tim does is amazing, fine. I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh man, could I do this one? Bam! Bam, baby! Bam! So that's a little fancier. That's the kind of thing that happens when you go take the a-pawn. But your move, Tim, absolutely fine. This ain't gonna work. Trading the bad bishop, very nice. The knight on b7, completely out. Check to the miserable king. Check to the miserable king, and that's what he deserves. Game over. He took the pawn. And to his credit, actually, I just didn't notice this until now. He took the pawn, and then he was like, well, I better push it to a5. That's what I'm doing. All right, everybody, thank you very much. Stay tuned for the next Dojo game review. Bye-bye.